Somewhere in your kitchen right now, there are foods sitting quietly on a shelf, tucked into a spice drawer, or waiting in the back of your refrigerator, that have the power to change what happens inside your bloodstream after every single meal. Not drugs, not supplements with a long list of side effects printed in tiny text on the back of the box. Food, and not exotic, expensive, impossible to find food either. Some of what I'm about to show you is so ordinary, so completely overlooked, that most people walk past it every single week without giving it a second thought. But here is what makes this list genuinely different. We are not going to talk in vague terms about what these foods might do. We are going to go inside the science, the actual peer-reviewed human research, the clinical trials, the meta-analyses, and the measurable numbers that explain exactly why these foods work. Because the evidence is there. It has been building for years, and most people have never heard a word of it. Here is what you need to understand before we go a single step further. When your blood sugar spikes, the kind of spike that happens after a meal loaded with refined carbohydrates, your body is flooded with glucose faster than it can process it. Your pancreas scrambles to release insulin. Your cells either hear that signal or they don't. And when this happens again and again, day after day, year after year, the consequences compound quietly in the background. Fatigue, inflammation, weight gain, and eventually something far more serious. But what if the meal itself could slow that entire process down? What if the right foods, eaten the right way, could blunt that spike before it ever fully forms? That is exactly what the 20 foods on this list do. And number 6 is one that billions of people have eaten for centuries as a basic grain staple, not realizing that the specific fiber inside it has now been confirmed by the European Food Safety Authority to reduce post-meal blood glucose spikes when consumed in sufficient amounts. That recognition doesn't come easily, and this food earned it. Stay with me through this entire list, because what these foods do together is more powerful than what any single one of them does alone. 1. Bitter melon. Let's start with the one that earns its name. Bitter melon looks like a pale green cucumber that lost a fight with a cactus. Warty, rough-skinned, and genuinely, unapologetically bitter. And that bitterness is not a flaw. That is the signal that something biologically active is at work. Used for generations across Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, and West Africa, bitter melon was the food traditional healers specifically reached for after heavy, starchy meals. They didn't have glucose meters, they didn't have clinical trials. But they noticed something real, and they built entire culinary traditions around it. Modern researchers have now gone inside those traditions and identified plant compounds in bitter melon, including one structurally similar to animal insulin, that appear to help cells absorb glucose from the bloodstream more efficiently. Some human studies on bitter melon extracts have shown reductions in blood sugar markers, though the scientific community is careful to note that larger, more rigorous trials are still needed before firm conclusions can be drawn. The evidence so far is promising, not definitive, but across 3 continents, independently, cultures arrived at the same food for the same problem. That kind of convergence does not happen by accident. Slice it thin, sauté it with onions, garlic, and bold spices, or juice it, dilute it heavily, and drink it before a meal. Start small. The bitterness is trying to tell you something. 2. Chia seeds. Here is where things get structurally fascinating and measurable. Chia seeds were currency among the Aztec and Maya, so valuable that warriors carried them on long journeys as their primary energy source. So prized, they were collected as tribute payments to ruling powers. And the reason becomes immediately obvious once you understand what happens to these tiny seeds the instant they meet liquid. Chia seeds are coated in soluble fiber that swells into a thick, gelatinous coating on contact with moisture, expanding to many times their original size almost immediately. When you eat chia seeds with or before a meal, that same gel forms inside your stomach, physically slowing how fast the carbohydrates in your meal are broken down and absorbed into your bloodstream. A single 1-ounce serving, which is about 2 tablespoons, delivers approximately 11 grams of dietary fiber. To put that in perspective, that is nearly 40% of what most adults are recommended to consume in an entire day, in a single small serving. The glucose spike that would have arrived fast and high arrives instead slow and manageable. That is not a metaphor. That is the physical mechanics of the gel doing its job. And there's a second layer. As that fiber ferments in the large intestine, gut bacteria break it down into compounds including butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid that research suggests sends signals helping the body metabolize glucose more efficiently over time. Short-term blunting of the spike, long-term improvement in how the body handles carbohydrates. In the same seed, soak 2 tablespoons in water, milk, or yogurt for 15 minutes. The gel that forms is exactly what's happening inside your stomach when you eat them with a meal. And we are only 2 foods in. If this is already making you rethink what's in your pantry, imagine what the next 18 are going to do. If you are new here, subscribe now. This is what we do every single week. Hit the like button too. It helps us reach the people who need this most. Now let's keep going, because number 3 has 2 clinical meta-analyses behind it, and the results surprised even the researchers. 3. Fenugreek seeds. Walk past the spice aisle of any Indian grocery store and you'll find them. Small, hard, amber-colored, slightly bitter. Most people who don't cook South Asian food have never given them a second glance. That oversight is now well documented in the scientific literature as a genuine missed opportunity. A meta-analysis published in the journal Nutrition Journal, pooling data from 10 clinical trials, found that fenugreek intake significantly reduced fasting blood glucose by approximately 0.96 millimoles per liter, reduced 2-hour post-load glucose by around 2.19 millimoles per liter, and reduced HbA1c, the 3-month average blood sugar marker, by approximately 0.85% compared to control groups. A more recent 2024 systematic review and meta-analysis published in Helion, pulling from 19 clinical studies, confirmed that fenugreek supplementation significantly lowered fasting plasma glucose by around 20 milligrams per deciliter and reduced HbA1c by approximately half a percentage point in people with type 2 diabetes. What is driving this? Fenugreek seeds are exceptionally high in a soluble fiber called galactomannan. When these seeds encounter liquid in the digestive tract, they form a thick, viscous gel that physically slows gastric emptying and delays the breakdown and absorption of carbohydrates. The seeds also contain a unique amino acid called 4-hydroxyisoleucine that research suggests may directly stimulate insulin release from the pancreas. 2 mechanisms working simultaneously, a dietary fiber effect and a potential hormonal one. Soak a tablespoon of whole seeds overnight in water and eat them in the morning. Or grind toasted seeds into a warming spice for lentils, stews, and flatbreads. The fresh leaves, called methi, offer a gentler version of the same benefit as a cooked green. Ancient wisdom, now with the numbers to back it up. 4. Okra. Here is a food with a history that runs deeper than its reputation. Okra made the crossing from West Africa during one of the darkest chapters in human history and became a cornerstone ingredient in cuisines from the Gulf Coast to the Caribbean to the Eastern Mediterranean. It carried its culinary identity across an ocean and embedded it so completely into new food traditions that those cuisines cannot be imagined without it today. And the whole time, it was doing something remarkable inside the bodies of the people eating it. The mucilaginous, slightly slippery texture that divides opinions so sharply at the dinner table, that is soluble fiber. Specifically, a polysaccharide compound, including one called rhamnogalacturonan, which researchers have studied for its specific anti-diabetic effects. When okra enters your digestive system, that mucilage coats the gut and physically slows the breakdown and absorption of carbohydrates. But okra doesn't stop there. Research has found that specific compounds in okra can inhibit alpha amylase and alpha glucosidase, the digestive enzymes responsible for breaking complex carbohydrates down into simple, rapidly absorbed sugars. Slow those enzymes, and you slow how fast sugar enters your blood. Multiple independent bodies of research have now pointed to okra as having unique properties acting through several metabolic pathways simultaneously. If the texture bothers you, roast it at high heat or sear it quickly in a very hot pan. The sliminess reduces dramatically. The fiber and the compounds remain fully intact. 5. Raspberries. Most fruit earns a cautious look from anyone managing blood sugar. And for plenty of fruits, that caution is earned. But raspberries occupy a different category, and the reason is specific enough to be worth understanding precisely. A single cup of raspberries, around 123 grams, delivers approximately 8 grams of dietary fiber. That is an unusually high fiber-to-sugar ratio compared to almost any other fruit you can name. But the reason raspberries belong on this list isn't just the fiber. It's what else is in them. Raspberries are exceptionally rich in anthocyanins, the deep red pigment compounds that have been shown in research to directly inhibit alpha-amylase and alpha-glucosidase, the very same enzymes that break carbohydrates down into absorbable sugar. Slow those enzymes, and you slow the glucose curve. Human studies specifically looking at raspberries eaten alongside carbohydrate-rich meals have found meaningfully reduced post-meal glucose and insulin responses compared to the same meals eaten without them. Fiber slowing digestion. Enzyme inhibition slowing sugar release. Two distinct mechanisms working at the same time. Eat a cup fresh or frozen as a snack, stir them into plain yogurt, or add them to oatmeal for a combination that attacks the blood sugar problem on multiple fronts simultaneously. 6. Barley. Barley fed Roman legions. It sustained the athletes who competed in the earliest recorded Olympic Games. It built civilizations across Mesopotamia before wheat or rice had even taken hold of the agricultural world. And then modern food culture largely forgot about it. That is one of the more consequential nutritional oversights of the past century. Barley contains beta-glucan, a specific soluble fiber, at concentrations higher than any other cereal grain. And the evidence for what beta-glucan does to blood sugar is not preliminary. It is robust enough that the European Food Safety Authority has formally approved a health claim for barley and oat beta-glucan, stating it reduces post-meal blood glucose responses when at least 4 grams are consumed alongside 30 grams of available carbohydrate. A clinical study published in Clinical Nutrition Research found that mixing high beta-glucan barley at just 50% with white rice in a meal significantly reduced the incremental area under the glucose curve compared to white rice alone in patients with type 2 diabetes. A 2025 randomized controlled trial published in the journal Nutrients confirmed that higher beta-glucan barley content was directly associated with lower blood glucose peak response and lower total glucose area under the curve compared to white rice controls. And here is the part most people don't know. A single barley-rich meal can improve your body's glucose response to the next meal you eat hours later. Researchers call this the second meal phenomenon. The fiber's effect on gut transit time extends well beyond the meal itself. Swap white rice for pearl barley in soups and grain bowls. Cook it as a savory breakfast porridge, the most unglamorous grain, quietly doing more metabolic work per serving than almost anything trending in nutrition today. 7. Cinnamon. And here's where it gets complicated. This is the one that stops people. Because you've been sprinkling it on things, stirring it into coffee, adding it to oatmeal, probably your whole life. And you had no idea what it may have been doing. But here is where I have to be honest with you. Because this list has no interest in overselling. Cinnamon's relationship with blood sugar research is real, but genuinely mixed. Some studies show modest improvements in fasting glucose and insulin sensitivity. Others show no meaningful effect, and the results appear to depend significantly on 2 specific factors: how much is being used and which type. Because here is what most people do not know. The cinnamon filling most grocery store shelves is cassia cinnamon, which contains a compound called coumarin at levels that can raise liver health concerns when consumed daily in larger amounts over extended periods. True Ceylon cinnamon, native to Sri Lanka, contains dramatically lower coumarin levels and a more complex, delicate flavor. It was this Ceylon variety that made cinnamon worth more than gold, along ancient spice routes stretching from Asia to Rome. And it is this Ceylon variety that the more favorable research most consistently refers to. If you are going to use cinnamon as part of a daily blood sugar strategy, Ceylon is the one to reach for. Half a teaspoon stirred into coffee or oatmeal, not a standalone solution. But as one layer of a broader food pattern, a low-risk, ancient addition with a plausible biological rationale that modern researchers keep returning to. 8. Walnuts. The Romans associated them with the gods, named them after Jupiter himself. Entire walnut trees were passed down through families as inherited assets across the Mediterranean, valued not just as food, but as living wealth. For blood sugar, the case is refreshingly uncomplicated. Walnuts contain almost no digestible carbohydrate. What they do carry is a rich concentration of plant-based omega-3 fatty acids, specifically alpha-linolenic acid, alongside meaningful protein and fiber. A single 1-ounce serving delivers approximately 2.5 grams of ALA, making them one of the richest plant-based sources of omega-3 fat available. On their own, walnuts register almost nothing on blood sugar. But research comparing regular walnut consumption to refined carbohydrate snack patterns has found consistent improvements in long-term blood sugar markers and measurable improvements in insulin sensitivity over time. Effects researchers tie largely to their unique fat profile. Replace a processed carbohydrate snack with a small handful of raw walnuts, and you have made a trade with compounding metabolic returns. 9. Lentils, especially black lentils. 10,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent of what is now the Middle East and South Asia, humans began cultivating lentils, one of the oldest agricultural crops in recorded human history. Black lentils carry something that makes them particularly relevant here: resistant starch. Resistant starch behaves fundamentally differently from regular starch. Instead of being rapidly digested into glucose in the small intestine, it travels largely intact to the large intestine, where it feeds beneficial gut bacteria rather than directly spiking blood sugar. A single cup of cooked lentils delivers around 15 to 16 grams of total fiber and nearly 18 grams of protein, a combination that produces one of the most gradual, gentle glucose responses of any carbohydrate-containing food available. And here is a detail worth knowing. Letting cooked lentils cool before eating increases their resistant starch content. The cooling process physically restructures the starch in a way that makes it even more resistant to digestion. Traditional preparations in warm climates, dal served at room temperature, stews made ahead and eaten later, were doing this naturally across thousands of years without any knowledge of the chemistry involved. Cook black lentils with cumin, garlic, and a splash of lemon. The acid further moderates their glucose impact. Eat them as a main, a side, or a base for almost anything. 10. Avocado. The case for avocado is simple enough to say plainly, and honest enough not to overcomplicate. Avocados contain almost no digestible carbohydrate. What they do contain is an abundance of monounsaturated fat, the same class of fat consistently linked to better metabolic outcomes in Mediterranean diet research, alongside substantial fiber that makes them unusually filling. When you eat avocado alongside a carbohydrate-containing food, that fat slows gastric emptying. It slows the rate at which everything in the meal moves through your digestive system and enters your blood. The glucose that would have arrived quickly arrives gradually. Research has consistently associated replacing refined carbohydrate-heavy foods with avocado with improvements in short-term blood sugar response and longer-term insulin sensitivity. Nothing complicated. The fat acts as a natural brake on everything around it. We are exactly halfway through, and if this has already shifted the way you think about your plate, share this video with someone who needs it right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the moment. There are 10 more foods to go, including a fermented ancient food that reshapes your gut microbiome, and a common cooking vinegar with more clinical trial data behind it than most people would ever expect. Don't leave before we get there. 11. Apple cider vinegar. Hippocrates used it. Ancient Babylon recorded its production. And now science has arrived to explain exactly what those ancient traditions were sensing. The Johnston and Kim study, published in Diabetes Care in 2004, was among the first rigorous human trials to demonstrate that vinegar could improve insulin sensitivity at a high carbohydrate meal in people with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. Subsequent research published in 2010 found that as little as 10 grams of vinegar, roughly 2 teaspoons, reduced blood sugar after a starch-containing meal by approximately 20%. A 2018 systematic review and meta-analysis found a significant reduction in HbA1c of approximately 0.39% over 8 to 12 weeks of vinegar use. In a 2023 randomized clinical trial published in Frontiers in Clinical Diabetes and Healthcare found that 30 milliliters of apple cider vinegar daily over 8 weeks produced a significant reduction in both fasting blood glucose and HbA1c levels in patients with type 2 diabetes compared to controls. The active compound is acetic acid. It appears to work through 2 pathways simultaneously. It slows the enzymes that break starch down into simple sugars in the gut, and it activates a cellular energy sensing pathway called AMP, which helps the body access stored fuel and improves how cells respond to insulin's signal. 1 to 2 tablespoons, diluted in a full glass of water, taken before or alongside a carbohydrate-rich meal. Always diluted. Undiluted vinegar over time can damage tooth enamel and irritate the throat, or use it generously in a vinaigrette over a salad served with the meal. The same acetic acid, reaching the same target. 12. Flaxseed. Ancient Egyptians cultivated it. Mesopotamian records document it. It is among the oldest crops in human agricultural history. But the most important thing to know about flaxseed before anything else is this: grind it. Whole flax seeds pass through the digestive system largely intact, carrying their benefits with them. Ground flaxseed is what the body can actually use. Ground flaxseed delivers a dual action that few single foods can match. Soluble fiber that physically slows carbohydrate absorption, much like chia and fenugreek. And an exceptionally high concentration of plant compounds called lignans, making flaxseed one of the richest dietary sources of lignans available anywhere. Research suggests that lignans may support insulin sensitivity and reduce markers of chronic inflammation over time. Not an immediate effect, a cumulative one, building across weeks and months of consistent daily use. 1 to 2 tablespoons ground into oatmeal, yogurt, or a smoothie, or folded into baked goods. Store pre-ground flax sealed in the refrigerator to slow oxidation. The benefit compounds quietly in the background. 13. Salmon. This one surprises people, because the connection to blood sugar is less obvious and considerably more layered than anything else on this list. Wild salmon, particularly sockeye with its deep characteristic red, is exceptionally rich in omega-3 fatty acids, and those omega-3s do something specific to cell membranes. They improve their fluidity, their flexibility, their ability to receive and respond to hormonal signals. One of the most important hormonal signals a cell membrane needs to receive clearly is insulin's. Improved membrane responsiveness means glucose moves out of the bloodstream and into cells more efficiently. But the deeper the red of the salmon flesh, the higher the concentration of a second compound that matters separately. Astaxanthin, the carotenoid pigment responsible for that deep color, is among the most potent antioxidants found in any food. Research has identified specific effects of astaxanthin on reducing the kind of oxidative damage that accumulates in the vascular system with chronically elevated blood sugar, the kind of damage that quietly compounds over years into serious complications. 2 to 3 servings of wild salmon weekly. The darker the flesh, the greater the astaxanthin content. Grilled simply with olive oil and lemon, or eaten cold over greens. Both the omega-3s and the astaxanthin do their best work consumed regularly over time. 14. Eggs. Eggs have been caught in decades of nutritional controversy that they have never fully deserved. And for blood sugar specifically, the case is clear. Eggs contain virtually no carbohydrate. On their own, they have almost no direct impact on blood sugar. But their contribution runs deeper than that. The protein slows the digestion of everything eaten alongside them. The B vitamins in eggs, including biotin and B12, are directly involved in the metabolic pathways that process carbohydrates efficiently. And for anyone dealing with complications associated with long-term elevated glucose, eggs contain lutein and zeaxanthin, 2 compounds with some of the strongest evidence available for protecting the delicate tissue of the eye from oxidative damage. Starting your day with eggs and cooked spinach and olive oil, before a day that will include carbohydrates, creates a metabolic environment that handles those carbohydrates more gracefully than beginning with a bowl of refined cereal or sweetened yogurt ever could. 15. Turmeric. Central to Ayurvedic medicine for thousands of years. Woven into daily cooking across South and Southeast Asia so completely that for most of its history, no one thought of it as remarkable. It was simply what you cooked with. The active compound is curcumin, and the effect relevant here operates through inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation creates interference in the signaling pathways between insulin and the cells it's trying to communicate with. When that inflammation is reduced, insulin's message gets through more clearly, cells respond more sensitively, and glucose is processed more efficiently. A growing body of research supports curcumin's anti-inflammatory action as a meaningful contributor to improved insulin sensitivity. The practical detail that matters most is bioavailability. Curcumin is poorly absorbed on its own, but consuming it alongside black pepper, which contains piperine, has been shown to increase curcumin absorption dramatically. Cooking it in fat, as most traditional preparations do, also improves how much the body actually uses. A warm turmeric latte with black pepper and a fat source. A golden spice rub for roasted vegetables or salmon. The same preparation that has been standard practice in South Asian kitchens for centuries, now with a mechanistic explanation. 16. Unsweetened Greek yogurt. This one requires a qualifier, and the qualifier is everything. Unsweetened Greek yogurt is a fundamentally different food from the sweetened, fruit-flavored versions that crowd grocery store dairy aisles. Those versions can contain as much added sugar as a dessert. Unsweetened Greek yogurt typically delivers around 15 to 17 grams of protein per serving, a meaningful probiotic count of live cultures, and a low carbohydrate profile that make it one of the most blood sugar-friendly dairy foods available. The protein slows digestion. The live cultures support a gut microbiome environment that research increasingly connects to better overall glucose regulation, and the fat, in full-fat versions, slows gastric emptying in exactly the same way avocado and olive oil do. If you need sweetness, add a few fresh raspberries, a dash of Ceylon cinnamon, or a small amount of monk fruit sweetener. What you preserve is the metabolic benefit of the yogurt. What you skip is the blood sugar cost of commercial sweeteners. Plain, full-fat, unsweetened Greek yogurt. Practical, consistent, and one of the most sustainable foods on this entire list. 17. Broccoli. Do not let the familiarity breed underestimation. What happens inside broccoli at a biochemical level goes well beyond fiber. Broccoli contains a compound called sulforaphane, concentrated most heavily in broccoli sprouts, which research has found to have meaningful effects on insulin sensitivity. It also contains glucosinolates, plant compounds studied for their ability to help counteract some of the cellular damage caused by chronically elevated glucose. These are not vague background effects. These are specific, targeted biological mechanisms that researchers are actively studying with considerable interest. And then there is the fiber and the vitamin C. A single cup of raw broccoli contains over 80 milligrams of vitamin C alongside approximately 2.4 grams of fiber, contributing to the overall antioxidant and metabolic protection the vegetable provides. Eat it lightly steamed rather than boiled to preserve sulforaphane. Or eat broccoli sprouts raw, where sulforaphane concentration is at its peak. The most accessible brassica vegetable in the world has been hiding a depth of biochemical activity that most people eating it have never been told about. 18. Green tea. No calories, no sugar, no carbohydrate. And what green tea does bring, in concentrated form, is one of the most studied antioxidant compounds found in any beverage on the planet. EGG, epigallocatechin gallate, the primary catechin in green tea, has been shown across multiple studies to improve insulin sensitivity and support more efficient glucose metabolism at the cellular level. The effect appears to work by improving how responsive cells are to insulin's signal, which is the core mechanism underlying most of what goes wrong in type 2 diabetes over the long term. Regular consumption of green tea has also been associated with modest improvements in fasting blood glucose and HbA1c in some clinical trials, though results across studies vary depending on dose and preparation. 2 to 3 cups daily, brewed from loose leaf or quality tea bags, steeped for 2 to 3 minutes in water that hasn't quite reached a full boil to preserve the catechins. Not bottled, not sweetened, brewed, fresh, and honest. A daily habit across East Asian cultures for thousands of years, whose metabolic effects are only becoming more validated as the science deepens. 19. Kimchi and fermented foods. Across every traditional food culture that has survived long enough to be studied with modern tools, fermentation shows up. Korean kimchi, Eastern European sauerkraut, West African fermented grains, Indian lassi. The ingredients change. The principle is universal. Fermented foods support the gut microbiome, and the gut microbiome, researchers have come to understand, is not a peripheral player in metabolic health. It is a central one. The composition of the bacterial community in your gut directly influences how your body processes carbohydrates, how efficiently glucose is managed, and how sensitive your cells remain to insulin's signal over time. Kimchi specifically has been studied for its effects on insulin resistance, with research showing improvements in glucose regulation in regular consumers. The fermentation process also slows the digestion of the vegetables themselves, and the microbiome benefits compound as a long-term investment that builds across weeks and months of consistent use. Look for raw, refrigerated kimchi with live cultures. Heat kills what makes it work. 20. Pistachios. We close where thousands of years of Middle Eastern hospitality began. Bowls of pistachios set out as a shared offering, cracked open slowly, eaten one at a time, as natural a part of the table as bread and salt. Pistachios combine protein, fiber, and monounsaturated fat in a single food. That combination does exactly what every fat and fiber pairing on this list does. It slows the digestion of the carbohydrates eaten alongside it. Several human studies have specifically tested the effect of pairing pistachios with higher carbohydrate meals, and found measurably reduced glucose and insulin responses compared to eating those meals without them. Pistachios also have one of the most favorable calorie-to-satiety ratios of any nut, making them one of the most practical snack substitutions available. And there is a behavioral dimension worth saying plainly. Shelling pistachios by hand, one at a time, is one of the few snack experiences that naturally slows the pace of eating. Slower eating means slower glucose delivery. Even before the fiber has time to do its work, the pistachio is already moderating the pace of the meal at the most fundamental level. A small handful before a meal, a portion alongside a piece of fruit, a bowl on the table where processed carbohydrate snacks used to sit. A habit that predates every modern nutrition recommendation by several thousand years. Here is what this entire list is actually telling you. The foods most powerful for blood sugar are not recent inventions. They are not pharmaceutical products with a decade of carefully controlled trials behind them. They are foods that real communities on every continent ate consistently for thousands of years, often without a single scientific explanation for why they worked. The research explaining why has been arriving steadily across the past several decades, and it keeps arriving. Meta-analyses, randomized controlled trials, long-term cohort studies, mechanistic research at the cellular level. The data is genuine. The evidence base is growing. Gel-forming fibers that physically slow how fast glucose enters your blood. Enzyme inhibitors that interrupt carbohydrate digestion before it reaches the bloodstream. Fermented foods that rebuild the gut microbiome from the inside out. Proteins and healthy fats that act as natural brakes on everything eaten alongside them. Anti-inflammatory compounds that reduce the cellular noise, preventing insulin's signal from being heard clearly. None of this replaces medical care. If you are managing diabetes or taking medication, these foods belong inside that care plan, discussed with your doctor, not substituted for professional treatment. But as a foundation, as the daily, practical, evidence-anchored logic of what you put on your plate, this is a strategy that worked long before blood sugar was a number anyone could measure. Start with one, add another the following week. Build the pattern the way any lasting change is built, slowly, consistently, and without disruption. Because the most powerful tools for steadier blood sugar were never locked away in a laboratory or behind a pharmacy counter. They were always already in the kitchen. If this video gave you something real, something you can actually use starting today, take 5 seconds and leave a like before you go. It costs you nothing, and it means everything for getting this kind of content in front of the people who need it most. Share it with someone in your life who is quietly fighting this battle, because the odds are you know someone who is. And if you are not subscribed yet, this is your sign. Every week we bring you the same depth, the same honesty, and the same commitment to science-backed ancestral nutrition. The next video is already waiting for you. We'll see you there.